Welcome to this in depth lesson on the origins of Italian literature, a fascinating journey into the heart of the 13th century, a truly pivotal century. It is here, in this vibrant period, that we witness the birth of a new linguistic and cultural expression. We will discover together how the 13th century was not just a time of change, but a true turning point for our literary tradition. This century, in fact, represents the fundamental crossroads from which our linguistic and artistic identity emerges. Every student, enthusiast, or curious individual will find in these roots the foundation for understanding the entire subsequent literary evolution. Let us prepare to explore together this founding moment, rich in innovations and extraordinary figures who shaped our heritage. The 13th century was a turning point for Italian literature, a period of gestation and birth. It was during these years that we witnessed the emergence and progressive legitimacy of vernacular languages. The vernacular began to take shape, increasingly distinguishing itself from classical Latin. Latin, the language of the church, of administration, and of the intellectual elite, had dominated the scene for centuries. It was the universal vehicle of knowledge and official communication throughout Europe. However, its grammatical complexity and its distance from everyday speech limited its accessibility. The transition to vernacular Italian, therefore, marked a radical change, a democratization of the written word. This new language, spoken and understood by ordinary people, became a powerful tool. It allowed for more direct and inclusive communication, overcoming the elitist barriers of Latin. This linguistic shift made literature accessible to a much wider audience. No longer just clerics and nobles, but also merchants, artisans, and the common people began to enjoy it. The spread of vernacular texts stimulated greater cultural participation, promoting new forms of expression. The adoption of the vernacular played a crucial role in forging a sense of national identity and cultural pride. Through a shared language, the various local communities began to recognize a common vision. This laid the foundation for the future cultural and political unification of the peninsula. The evolution of Italian from Latin is a fascinating and complex process spanning many centuries. It was not a sudden change, but a slow and continuous transformation. Vulgar Latin, spoken daily, underwent continuous modifications, increasingly distinguishing itself from written Latin. Latin evolved over the centuries, influenced by local dialects and the interactions between different populations. Each region and community developed its own phonetic, lexical, and grammatical variants. These differences gave rise to a wealth of linguistic expressions, the so called vernaculars. This polycentric evolution led to the emergence of Romance languages, including our Italian. Spanish, French, Portuguese, and Romanian share a common ancestor. Each Romance language is the result of a unique process of transformation and adaptation to the local context. The 13th century marks the initial and crucial stages of this linguistic development toward a more recognizable form. The first literary texts in the vernacular begin to document these nascent languages. They testify to their vitality and growing expressive capacity, opening up new perspectives for literature. Initially, regional variations and dialects were very marked and diverse. However, gradually these coalesced into forms that we are beginning to recognize as Proto Italian. The prestige of certain cultural areas, such as Sicily and later Tuscany, helped define a more structured vernacular. In this context of the flourishing of vernacular languages, religious poetry found fertile ground for expression. It flourished significantly, taking advantage of the new accessibility of the language to convey spiritual messages. The vernacular allowed for more direct and heartfelt communication with the faithful. St. Francis of Assisi emerges as a central and luminous figure of this spiritual and literary movement. His life, his teachings, and his profound devotion inspired an entire era. His influence extended far beyond religious boundaries, permeating the culture of the time. His most famous work, The Canticle of the Creatures, also known as the Laudes Creaturarum, is an eloquent testimony to the spiritual fervor of the era. This text, steeped in mysticism and love for creation, represents one of the earliest and highest expressions of our language. It is a hymn to the beauty of nature and the divine presence in every aspect of life. The canticle was written in the Umbrian vernacular, a significant choice for the time. Writing in the Umbrian dialect rather than Latin made it immediately understandable to the people. This decision underscored Francis's desire to reach everyone with his message of peace and brotherhood. Through his verses, St. Francis celebrates the beauty of creation and the boundless love of God. The sun, the moon, water, fire, earth, and even death are praised as divine manifestations. Each element of nature is seen as a brother or sister, a precious gift to be welcomed with gratitude. The canticle fully reflects the Franciscan ideals of humility, poverty, and universal brotherhood. Francis, through his life, preached the importance of a return to the simplicity of the gospel. He called for a rediscovery of joy in creation and in mutual service. The language used in the canticle is simple, immediate, and accessible, yet charged with profound spirituality. Its apparent simplicity conceals theological complexity and extraordinary emotional power. It touches the hearts of those who listen, inviting contemplation and praise. The message of the canticle resonated deeply with the people, transcending social and cultural barriers. Its authenticity and closeness to popular sentiment made it a beloved text. Even today, it continues to inspire and move with its purity and expressive power. This iconic work solidified the potential of the vernacular as a literary and spiritual language. It demonstrated unequivocally that the vernacular was capable of expressing complex emotions and profound spiritual truths. The Song of Songs paved the way for further developments in vernacular literature. The 13th century was a dynamic period that also saw the emergence of distinct poetic schools, each with its own distinctive characteristics. These schools, though diverse, all contributed to defining the canons of the new vernacular poetry. They enriched the literary landscape with new forms and themes. The Sicilian school, born at the court of Frederick II, was the first to cultivate a refined and secular poetic language. It was a laboratory for linguistic and formal experimentation. It demonstrated that the vernacular could be a vehicle for high poetry, not just religious or popular expression. This school flourished in the cultural milieu of the court of Frederick II, an enlightened emperor and a great patron of the arts. The Sicilian court, multicultural and open to Eastern influences, became an extraordinarily important center of literary production. Here, the Provençal tradition merged with the new vernacular sensibility. Giacomo da Lentini, notary and poet, is recognized as the undisputed leader of the Sicilian school. He is credited with the invention of one of the most celebrated verse forms in Italian and world literature, the sonnet. His genius created a poetic structure destined for enduring success. The sonnet, with its rigorous structure of 14 hendecasyllabic lines divided into two quatrains and two tercets, quickly became a favored form. Its ability to contain a complex thought in a limited space made it ideal for expressing romantic and philosophical concepts. It became a cornerstone of Italian literature, influencing poets of every era. The Tuscan school, though influenced by Sicilian models, developed its own style and identity. Tuscan poets reworked the themes and metrical forms they had learned, adapting them to their own vernacular. They gave an original touch to love poetry and beyond. Gittone d'Arezzo was a prominent and highly influential figure within the Tuscan school. Considered the founder of the Gittoniani movement, he served as a model for many later poets. His vast and complex output demonstrates a profound reflection on poetry. In his works, Gittone explored themes such as love, morality, and politics in depth. His poetry is often characterized by a more arduous language and greater conceptual complexity than that of the Sicilian poets. He sought to elevate the vernacular to a language capable of addressing highly speculative topics. Guittone's work, though sometimes criticized for its sophistication, was crucial. It paved the way for the subsequent, more innovative poetic movement that would dominate the Florentine scene. His experimentation laid the foundation for the great development of vernacular poetry. The culmination of this fertile 13th century was the emergence of a poetic movement of extraordinary importance, the Dolce Stil Novo. This movement represents both a point of arrival and a new beginning for Italian poetry. It marks a fundamental stylistic and thematic evolution. The Stil Novo movement had its main centers in Bologna and Florence, cities at the cultural forefront of the time. These urban centers, with their universities and intellectual ferment, provided the ideal environment for the development of new poetic ideas. It was a melting pot of talent and innovation. The Stil Novo represented a significant shift in the focus of love poetry. The poets of the Stil Novo movement departed from the more rigid conventions of Provençal and Sicilian poetry. They sought a new spiritual and intellectual dimension for the feeling of love. Central and prominent figures of this poetic revolution were Guido Guinizelli and Guido Cavalcanti. Guinizelli, with his famous song Al cor gentil rempaira sempre amore, is considered the precursor of the Stil Novo. Cavalcanti, on the other hand, was one of the greatest exponents with a more tormented and philosophical poetry. These poets raised the concept of love in their lyric poetry to heights never reached before. Love is no longer just an earthly passion or a feudal service, but an experience that involves the soul and the reason. It becomes a path of inner perfection and spiritual elevation. In the works of the Stil Novo, the beloved woman undergoes a profound metamorphosis, transforming into an angelic figure. It is no longer just an object of sensual desire or courteous obsequiousness. She becomes an ethereal being, a conduit between man and the divine, a bearer of salvation. This angelic woman is conceived as a pure source of spiritual inspiration. Her beauty is not merely external, but reflects an inner perfection and otherworldly grace. Her gaze, her greeting are capable of elevating the poet's soul, making him worthy of virtue. At the same time, she is seen as a source of moral refinement, pushing the lover toward virtue. Love for the angelic woman does not corrupt, but elevates, purifying the soul of all baseness. It transforms man into a better person, capable of understanding and nobility of spirit. Stil Novo poetry explored with acute sensitivity the complexities of love and the sublime power of beauty. It analyzed the internal dynamics of the feeling of love, its joys and torments. It investigated how the experience of love could profoundly affect the individual. She also explored the intricate and subtle relationship between the human and the divine, mediated by love. Earthly love, if purified and idealized, can lead to contemplation of the divine. The angelic woman becomes a bridge to a transcendent dimension, a reflection of celestial perfection. The Dolce Stil Novo marked a decisive turning point, laying the foundation for future great literary achievements. Its stylistic innovation, the depth of its themes, and the centrality of the angelic female figure opened new avenues. They paved the way for the work of Dante Alighieri and the entire Italian lyric tradition. Thus, in this journey through the 13th century has revealed the deep and vibrant roots of our literature. From the birth of the vernacular to the emergence of poetic schools and the innovation of the Stilnovista movement, every stage was crucial. Understanding this period is key to fully appreciating the richness and complexity of Italy's literary heritage. Thank you for joining us on this illuminating exploration.